Good morning, and on behalf of all of us, thank you to the National Academies for hosting us and for shining the light on middle school, an often forgotten group within the field of public K-12 education. I'm Christopher Comforo. I'm the proud principal at Stort Hobson Middle School in Washington, D.C., a D.C. public school. I'm also the co-chair of the 9th Grade Counts Network, a part of Raise D.C., which is a collective impact group bringing a cross-sector group of people together to look at 9th grade readiness to make sure our students are on track to graduate successfully on time. On this panel, we are joined by educators and administrators from Montgomery County, Maryland, Broward County, Florida, and Washington, D.C. For a more complete description of our backgrounds and Twitter handles, please refer to the bio-sketch section of the attendee packet. Each of us are going to have 12 minutes to present on our different topics. And as school administrators, I know that we are poised to speak to large groups of people for hours on end, but we'll be sure to stick to the time limits so that you guys can have a chance to ask questions of us as well. Robby Dodd, who is the principal at Walt Whitman High School, will start us off, followed by Joey Jones, who is the principal at Robert Frost Middle School, and Jeff Sullivan, who is the director of system-wide athletics for Montgomery County Public Schools. I'll turn it over to Robby to get us started.
Good morning. It's great to see you all. Once again, I'm Robby Dodd. I'm the principal at Walt Whitman High School, and it's indeed a privilege to be here today to speak briefly to you. I will do my best to stay within the 12 minutes. Today I'm going to primarily provide you with an overview of research that we conducted in two fairly highly impacted middle schools in Montgomery County, 6 to 8 middle schools. Our research showed that achievement, student engagement, and students' perceptions of the classroom environment can indeed be enhanced through changing organizational structure. There's been a lot of really spot-on talk today about context and environments, and that's what our research really centered on. So let's start with a picture. Why do these 3 middle school administrators look so concerned? Well, my first thought when I looked at the picture just the other day was how much younger I look in that picture. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, this represents a story that I'd like to share with you very briefly. In 2009, I was an elementary school principal. I had the opportunity to become a middle school principal after having never set foot in a middle school professionally in my career, which is not something I'd recommend to any of you professionally. And the most important part of that opportunity was that I got to essentially loop with my kids in my elementary school to the middle school that they were going to attend. That's a rare opportunity as a school leader to be able to follow your kids along. Within a year or two of arriving at Argyle Middle School, I started to see what you read about, what you've heard about today, which is progressive alienation from school norms, structures, a progressive kind of disengagement on the part of kids, and certainly decreased achievement over time, 6 to 8 in middle school. These were kids that I had seen make significant progress in grades 3 to 5. And then by the end of 6th grade, early 7th grade, important outcomes, you could see them start to flag. And I was concerned because these were kids I knew, that I cared about, that I had worked with since they were little, and certainly their parents were concerned. So as an elementary trained educator, I started to think about, well, why is this happening? Why are their experiences in middle school so different than their experiences in elementary school? So in the literature, you see a few of the factors that people have done extensive ad nauseum research on over the years. They've been mentioned today. Of course, grade configurations always comes up. In the last decade, there's been more and more research on comparing 6 to 8 middle school outcomes and K-8 outcomes, especially in urban areas. You'll often see in the literature the association between large cohort sizes and a decline in achievement. That's a big one. And then there's really important research out there on how secondary teacher self-efficacy is in general lower than elementary schools teacher self-efficacy. But with my experience as an elementary leader and teacher and as a middle school principal, the single biggest factor that I identified as a difference was those bureaucratic organizational structures that largely organize the day for middle school students. They've been talked about today. Kids in elementary schools, typically K to 5, spend most of their time in self-contained or semi-self-contained settings over their careers in elementary school, and then all of a sudden they transition to middle school. They have 6, 7, 8 teachers. They have disparate peer arrangements in every class, and they start to experience social pressure in ways that they haven't in elementary school. It's been mentioned today that those non-parental adults become more and more important in middle school, and they have more teachers, but they don't necessarily have as strong a relationships. This is just a quick look at some of the data that we looked at. You can see 7 or 8 feeder elementary schools here with 3 middle schools. You can see that the least engaged elementary students are almost as engaged as the most engaged 6th graders. And you can also see that progressive disengagement right here from grade 6 to grade 8. This was the Gallup Hope survey that we gave to kids. So that was a real concern. So as kids transition through middle school, they become less and less engaged. So we decided to try to innovate. The mayor just talked about changing structures, changing systems. I would argue that it's probably the hardest thing to do in education. We spend a tremendous amount of resources on professional development, which is very important. We train teachers, but we never really get at the heart of how we organize kids for instruction and teachers for teaching. So Project Success, which stands for Student Unified Curriculum, I can say this, I promise, combining English, digital literacy, science, and social studies. It's near and dear to my heart. It's an innovative approach to organizing kids for instruction in 6th grade. So what does it do? Well, we've talked about having so many different teachers, having so many different peer arrangements. Essentially, it's pretty simple. It's a semi-self-contained model after the transition from elementary to middle school. Kids spend half of each school day with one teacher for 4 subjects. That teacher only has one intact group of kids that they teach. They teach them for half the day. It's challenging. They have to integrate multiple subjects. We created common planning time for them to work together to do that. They have much more time to get to know their kids individually. Therefore, they spend more time differentiating, matching the kinds of instructional needs that they know their kids need. And of course, they have fewer of those dreaded middle school transitions, class to class, period to period. So our belief in Project Success was the following. When we did our research, that we thought that if we could create stronger perceptions of the classroom environment, that really means instruction, that and everything from student choice, student autonomy, student interaction in the classroom, enhancing students' goal structures, focusing on mastery versus performance, that students would become progressively more engaged, and ultimately we would see increases in student achievement. And we did. So in our research, we randomly assigned at the end of 5th grade 90 students to Project Success in 2 highly impacted middle schools, randomly assigned 300 students to what we refer to as ATS, Achievement Through Specialization, which is really just departmentalization. And we followed those kids for a year, from 2016 to 2017. You can see by the end of 6th grade, the differences, significant differences in their literacy development. Not only did students in Project Success outscore their classmates on the full-scale MAP-R, but in all 3 subtests, vocabulary, informational text, literary text, the students in Project Success did significantly better. But maybe the most striking finding was the elimination of the poverty-based achievement gap in literacy development. You can see here that in Project Success, by the end of 6th grade, there really was no gap. You can also see here that students that received free and reduced meals by the end of 6th grade actually outperformed students who don't receive free and reduced meals in the control group. And you can see that this gap grew in the departmentalized settings over the course of their first year in middle school. 2 other really important findings. Grades. If you've ever been in an elementary classroom, grades are not typically the focus of elementary teaching. They become very important, as we all know, in secondary education. Students in Project Success earn significantly higher grades, and we've heard a lot about psychosocial development today. Peer engagement, which we found in departmentalized settings, students over the course of 6th grade in departmentalized settings actually valued their peers less by the time 6th grade was over. So they were less willing to take risks. They were less willing to raise their hand in class because of how they might be received or if they have the wrong answer. In Project Success, by the end of 6th grade, students with that very strong cohort mentality, having developed relationships with one group of kids and a teacher over the course of the year, valued their peers more. I'm running out of time, so I'll speed it up. This was a big one, too. We surveyed teachers. We looked at teachers in the ATS setting, in control, and we also looked at the Project Success teachers. Not surprisingly, teachers in departmentalized settings emphasized grading homework much more. They allowed kids what I think they thought was more autonomy, but what it really was that they didn't get to know their kids as well because it's very tough. This is no criticism of departmentalized teachers, but they have to get to know 150 kids over one school year. This was also really important. We found that kids in Project Success worried much less about academic comparisons. They were less concerned about grades. They really had more intact growth mindsets by the end of 6th grade than the students in the control group. A couple things that stand out here. We've heard about the importance of non-parental adults. The Project Success teachers very strongly felt like that they assisted students with personal or social problems more than teachers in the control. And they really allowed students, I love that picture of the kids working cooperatively earlier. They allowed their kids to interact more. They allowed their kids more academic choice. Kids were able to contribute quiz and test questions and kind of give meaning to the work that they were doing. So it's really a question of equity. The way we structure schools, which again I'll say is probably the hardest thing to change in education, has a tremendous impact on the achievement gap, on the opportunity gap. Project Success is a small intervention. It still exists at 2 schools. It's thriving. I want to get Joey Jones to implement it before we're done today. But it shows, it makes a difference. Finally, in 1972, a well-known researcher referred to junior high schools as the cesspool of American public education. That gave way to the rise of the middle school movement. In 1989, the Carnegie Corporation's Turning Points, a seminal publication, strongly suggested that departmentalization needed to be replaced by more student-centered grouping strategies. Here we are today, and most middle schools in this country are still departmentalized. So I would leave you with the idea that we should take aim at those structures, have the courage to change them, And when we do, teachers will become teachers of kids and not just teachers of content. Thank you.